Yeah, there are some things that there is no such thing as around, there's only through. And the sooner you start facing those things, I think the sooner you'll start understanding that they're only controlling you because you're letting them in a lot of ways.
And that's why the drive to 5 is so powerful. Because the drive to 5 is whatever you were overcompensating for earlier in your life, you can get back to center now that you realize it was an overcompensation.
Next Level Nation, welcome back to another episode of Next Level University, where we help you level up your life, your love, your health, and your wealth. We hope you enjoyed our latest episode. Episode number 1432, Are You the Best Partner You've Ever Been? Today, for episode number 1433, Alan is going to interview me because we have a lot of new listeners always. That's one of the benefits of growing. We get new listeners, and when you're new to the family, we would like to make sure you know who you're listening to. So you'll see people do this on social media where they'll say, let me reintroduce myself. For those of you who are new, we have the benefit of talking into microphones so we can reintroduce ourselves in many different ways. So I don't know where we're going to talk about, what we're going to talk about, where we're going to go, whatever. Alan, hi, how are you?
It's not just the message, it's the messenger. I think who you are matters just as much as what you help people with.
It's fair play.
I also think what you help with people with also helps you create who you are, and it's a cyclical thing. Question.
Yeah, man.
All right, so you are someone who came from a place of limited means.
Sure.
You didn't go to college. You weren't necessarily a rock star student. And I was thinking about what I wanted to interview you about. I do want you to tell your story, but I also don't. No, I do and I don't. But I want you to tell it from the frame of insecurity. I was asking myself, so Kevin and I take breaks in between these episodes because my camera needs to charge the battery a bit. And I was thinking, what would be the most valuable? What would be the most valuable? What would be the most valuable? And I was thinking about all my clients. I was thinking about what makes the difference in people's lives. I was thinking about why some people never achieve their goals, why some people never achieve their dreams, why some people might be out there thinking about their goal, their dream, and they don't believe they can do it. Or maybe they don't know how to do it. Or maybe they don't know where to start. Or maybe they didn't have guidance or whatever. And I think one of the main reasons people don't achieve their dreams is what we've talked about many times in this podcast, which is self-belief and self-worth. The psychological, clinical definitions would be self-efficacy and self-concept. You are someone who I would consider had a ton of insecurities growing up and didn't maybe know that. As I've grown and evolved, I had a ton of insecurities that I didn't realize were driving. And as you grow and evolve, you realize that those things were driving us more than we thought. Can you tell your story from the frame of insecurity?
Oh, man, that's a loaded question. I don't know if I've ever done it from that. Like the whole thing?
Yeah. When did you start noticing that you were insecure? And then what was your reaction to that? And then did the insecurities grow over time? And how did you eventually... Because at the end of the day, I just think you started finally... I remember there was this one clip on YouTube. We went to the gym with Eddie P. He is the founder of Your World Within on YouTube. And the morning mindset workout that I do every single day, it's called Ode to Excellence. It's an Eddie P video. Shout out to Eddie P if you're listening. He does listen apparently, which is awesome. But he did a video of you and me in the gym one time. And it had our podcast in the background of the video. And it was you and me working out, and you said, I looked my demons in the eye, finally, and I faced them all. That is the frame I want you to tell your story from.
Some good shit right there. I said that?
You did.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
It was
that was ahead
it
of
was
my
a
time.
behind the scenes frame of you in the gym. Your back
Shout
was
out.
looking jacked.
Shout out to Eddie P. I remember that video. That was a world-class video.
Yeah, it was.
The first time I can ever remember being insecure, I was in, oh man, maybe fifth or sixth grade, I believe. And for some reason, when you are new to a class, you go around, so in school, you go around and everybody says, this is what my mom does for work, this is what my dad does for work. For some reason. I don't know why that's a icebreaker. Does anybody really know what their parents do at that age? I don't know. But I didn't know my dad. I didn't meet my dad with the understanding that he was my dad until I was 27. So I remember saying, my dad's in construction. That was what I had. Like, that seems realistic. That's possible. That was the first time I ever really remember being insecure about somebody knowing the truth. That's what I would say is the first conscious thought I have of that. You want me to go? Keep going.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to tell it from that frame.
You got this. I think all of us will grow to the extent that we face our deepest insecurities.
I would agree. I don't know if I really, to your point, I don't know if I really understood what my insecurities were, because in middle school, I mean, obviously one of my biggest insecurities is being short. In middle school, luckily everybody's the same height. I'm sure you and I were probably the same height in middle school.
Mm-hmm.
Then for some reason...
Me, you, and Dave
yeah,
were the shortest at one point.
We were the short kings, yeah.
Yeah.
So that probably... It was probably high school where I really started to understand, because yeah, I played baseball when I was younger, but I was never insecure because I was good. And I always, like I've said this before, I've always made every all-star team I ever tried out for. I got recruited to play travel teams. I was really good at baseball, and I was never insecure because it always seemed to work out pretty well. So I never really thought about it too much. Then when high school started, I think that's when I probably really had more insecurities. Because I don't know if you remember this, but when you and I started high school, the seniors were grown-ass men.
Mm-hmm.
These were real men. These were, I remember looking and saying, no way you're 4 years older than I am. Not a chance. No way. You have a full beard.
I know exactly who you're talking about.
Yeah, it just didn't make any sense. So I think going into high school, I had a very small group of friends, and Alan says I was popular. I do not think I was nearly as popular as Alan thinks. And yeah, I think it's that high school experience where I don't want to sit alone at lunch. I'm going to sit by myself like Steven Glansberg. I don't want to do that. It's a super bad reference for those who don't know. And then the next like real big time was when I started pumping gas. That was all my friends were away at college, so I decided I didn't want to go to college after high school. All my friends...
Whoa. What about the pit stains?
Oh, my goodness. Yeah. I was in Mr. Smith's class. Mr. Smith was our wild English teacher, right? He was an English teacher?
Yeah.
He was a wild English teacher. I hope he's doing well if he's still with us. He was older, so I'm not sure. But then I raised my hand to ask a question, and this kid next to me, Craig, he said, "Oh, nice pit stains, man." And I was like, "What? What are you talking about?" And I looked over, and my armpits were sweating. And that was the first time I had ever thought about that. That was the first time ever. And that, to this day, is still something I think about. To this day, probably 15 years later.
I hope the listeners are seeing patterns in their own past of how much...
Right? One thing.
These little things that people say about us in an imperfect moment, it affects us so much when we're kids. And it continues to affect you.
Yeah. Not necessarily. I mean, imagine if you and I don't have the opportunity, pleasure, displeasure of working at an office, but imagine if you walk into a room and somebody's talking trash behind your back and they don't know you're there. I can imagine that still happens to people to this day. So
Definitely.
it doesn't take much. But when he said that, that was the first time I never really thought about that. I wasn't worried about that. It wasn't a conscious thought. That I was very conscious of that moving forward. I wouldn't wear gray shirts. I wouldn't wear any shirt where it was easy. You could tell I was sweating. I bought clinical strength deodorant for a while.
Yep.
Later in life, I actually dated somebody who had hyperhidrosis, which is what I thought I had. That's when you sweat a ton. So I learned about it later in life, which was very interesting.
Theme. What was the theme of your insecurity in hindsight in middle school, and then what was the theme in high school? And what was your correction? So in middle school, you talked about in 5th grade lying to compensate for the insecurity of the truth.
Yep.
What was the deepest insecurity theme, and then what was your reaction to it? Middle school, high school.
Middle school, deepest insecurity was, being the kid without a dad. That's it. I lied about it. That was my trauma response was, I'll lie about this. No, I don't even know if that was conscious though. I just didn't have an answer. I don't think I wanted to open the can of worms of saying I don't know, because I don't really know if I was conscious enough to understand what all that really meant at that point. So that was, it was lie. Just a little white lie. Never hurt anybody on the first day of school.
Yeah, my dad's in construction.
That's it. That's all you need to know. Hammers, nails, saws, the whole nine, really. That's pretty much it. In high school, judgment for sure. Being on the outside of popular kids, looking bad in front of the popular girls, that was a big one for sure. And how did I combat that? Probably just shrinking myself, just not trying, just not putting myself out there, hiding. Turtle more than puffer, I would say. Yeah, I think, again, being good at baseball was something that gave me a lot of significance, but I don't know if I ever really truly felt like I fit in with the popular kids. Like, I got invited to the parties and stuff, but I never felt like I fit in there. Never, ever did I feel like I truly fit in there.
In hindsight, how come? In hindsight. Obviously, we didn't know what any of this was back then. It's wild to think back to.
I don't know. Even back then, I was going to say even back then, I do believe I was more focused on my character. But I made some mistakes. But then I would hear through the grapevine of what other people were doing. Yeah, I honestly think I didn't want to surround myself with people who I didn't really enjoy their characters. I didn't like the way a lot of the other people were, just like very toxic masculine. I didn't like that. I didn't want to be a part of that. I've never liked that. I'm raised by women, raised by my mom and my grandmother. I've always had a soft spot for that. So I think that was a big piece of it is we're not really friends. We're not really ever going to be close friends. So I don't really want to be part of everything that's going on. But there also was a very insecure part of me that wanted to be invited to everything too. So it was the in-between that of saying, wow, I'm not popular enough to get invited to certain things, but also not wanting to go to things when I did get invited. It was that kind of that balance. I think I knew I didn't belong. But I do believe part of me wanted to belong, but also part of me didn't want to belong. I just couldn't figure out what was the one worth feeding.
It's called inner civil war. It's crazy to think back on. Okay, post high school, you're at the gas station. You're the man.
I was the gas station guy.
The man with a plan.
Oh, yeah.
That chapter. So you have middle school, high school, that chapter. What was the insecurity in hindsight? And what was the response to it?
There were many insecurities at that time. Number one, I'm going to be the towny guy who never gets out of here, and all my friends are going to leave. That was the biggest one. Most of my family still lives in the town that they're from. Nobody left. Nobody went anywhere else, really. And if they did, it wasn't far. So it was, I'm going to be stuck at this gas station, and I don't really know what the hell I'm going to do after this. I was training martial arts, so that was a piece of it. I'm telling you, the theme of my life, I really, really think this now more than ever, is I always felt like I was a loser, so I would do something that would create some sort of interest. So think of two versions. One version, gas station Kev, who's okay with working at the gas station and just says, this is what I'm going to do forever. This is it. I didn't go to college, and I'll figure it out. Version 2, I'm training to be a professional fighter, and that's why I'm here. It's close to my house. I work the same hours every day, 6 to 2. It's easy. The gym's right up the street. I live 5 minutes down the road. I can train every single night. I don't work weekends. Easy enough. So I think there was a part of me that always wanted to be different, but was always afraid to be different in the wrong ways. Or the ways easier to judge from an aspirational standpoint. Because if you think about it, I decided not to go to college, and I was okay with that. I was very much okay with that. I was proud of that, genuinely. But working at the gas station, I wasn't proud of. Because that was another form of judgment. But I was super proud to tell everybody I was training to be a fighter. So I do believe I was jumping from, I'm going to get judged for this, but at least let me get judged for something that I am okay with being judged for. I would say that was really that was the theme at that time. And then, like we talked about in the previous episode, I job hopped. I jumped around from job to job. I remember specifically at the gas station, it was seeing old people that I went to high school with, seeing girls I used to have crushes on, seeing just attractive women that would come in. It was like, this could never happen. No way. This would never happen. Old friends would come in. That was brutal. And then eventually the gas station got bought out by some guy who was just an ass. He was terrible. We used to have to cash out at the end of our shift, and we'd have to figure out the numbers on the pumps and make sure all the numbers added up. And routinely, my boss would just take money from me. Routinely. Because if the numbers weren't off, he'd say, well, the money went somewhere. It's like, well, maybe there's something wrong with some of this technology that hasn't been looked at in the last 50 years, possibly. Now I know. But it was, routinely. It's like, $20 here, $40 here. Well, when you're making $10 an hour under the table, you're making $80. Somebody takes 20 of that. You just lost a quarter of your day's work, really. So that was terrible. That was a very interesting time working for somebody who was just not a good person. Just a very not character-driven human being. Very not aligned. Just a sleazy human being. So that was the gas station. And then I ended up leaving there and working at the hospital, being a personal trainer, paying $1,000 to get out of my personal trainer job because I hated sales so much and they were so negative and they were toxic too, for sure. Truck driver, forklift operator. That sucked because I was working like 70 hours a week for $12 an hour. Not good. Left that. See, and this is another theme. I knew I didn't want to do that job anymore. I didn't want to be a forklift operator. I didn't want to drive a truck. The hours suck. Nobody cares about my life. I don't want to be here anymore. Work every Saturday. No, don't want to do it. So I was talking to one of my coworkers, Lance. His name was Lance. Interesting guy. Him and I were very, very good buddies for a short time. And he was talking about one of his friends that was a firefighter. And I said, that would be it. That's it. I want to do that. That sounds awesome. I love that. I want to save lives. That's awesome. I'm physically fit. That'd be great. And he said, well, you got to go down to your town and see if they're hiring. And I was like, all right, well, let me see what I can do. So I went down to the town and I said, hey, I'm looking to join a volunteer firefighting department. Do you guys do that? And they said, well, we're actually starting a new round. So we send all the people who want to be volunteers, we send them out to get training and it's all taken care of. And I was like, interesting. Okay. I went to my job and said, hey, I need to be home Monday and Wednesday by X time. And they're like, no, not going to happen. Can't happen. So that's when I went in and I said, all right, well, I'm quitting. I quit.
Wait, why did you have to be home Monday?
Because I needed the fire academy. I needed to go to the...
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
Those are the nights.
Yep.
And it was like the yard, it was called, was 45 minutes from where I lived. And then it was like another hour to the fire station where we were getting the training. So I think I said I had to be home at like 3 every day. And they're like, no way. So I ended up going in and quitting that job. And I remember the owner of the branch, he was like the head guy there. He definitely laughed at me and said, you don't have another job lined up? What are you going to do? And I said, I don't know. I'll figure it out. This isn't my first rodeo. I've done this many times before. So I go to the fire academy and I met a guy there, Big Z, Zach. I have a lot of interesting people in my past. Great dude. He's a massive guy, covered in tattoos, nicest dude in the world. Just a good dude. Good dude. Would give you the shirt off of his back. Just a good guy. And he said, what do you do for work? I don't have a job. I quit. They wouldn't let me have flexible hours, and I wanted to do this, so I quit. And he said, you have any experience in contracting? I said, nah. I like working with my hands.
Well, my dad used to work in construction.
My dad was a pretty serious construction worker, so no, I said I like. I said I like working with my hands. I'm willing to learn. Yeah, give me a shot. I'll see what I can do. So he said, all right, we're renovating this house. We'll give you $15 an hour. You in? I said, yeah, I'm in. Let's do it. So I ended up working pretty much for the entire time I was going through the fire academy. I remember I worked with him. And it was awesome because he was in the fire academy, so he knew what time I had to leave. It's perfect. It was amazing. It was like a super easy job. Cool dude. They left most of the time, so I was just there by myself all day, painting the house and doing stuff. It was great. I enjoyed that very much. And then after that, I ended up going to... I don't know if I've ever told this on the podcast. So that job ended, and I had nothing. I had no idea what I was going to do because, again, the fire academy, I had graduated, but I realized it's nearly impossible to get a job as a firefighter unless you're military or police, or you have your paramedic. There's a lot of things that go into that, and I'm not saying that from a negative place. That is the way it should be. But I realized pretty quickly, I don't know. This is going to take a long time if I'm going to end up being a full-time paid firefighter. And at that time, I had seen how dangerous it was, too. We've done live fire trainings. I've heard the statistics of how many firefighters get cancer. It was like, oh, man. This is potentially more than I had bargained for.
What are the statistics?
I don't remember off the top of my head, but...
Bad?
Not good. Yeah, it's very, very, very dangerous.
Yeah.
Very
sure.
dangerous.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
But you got to figure the stuff that's burning is not like natural wood.
No, it's mostly everything's plastic now. Almost everything is. And plastic is very, very dangerous when it's burning.
Yeah.
Very dangerous. Very toxic.
Hey everybody, I'm Rebecca. I started off with the group coaching and it was fantastic. I was able to use the PPT to kind of track. Now back then I wasn't very consistent, and as of late, I have been working with Alan individually, and he's gotten to know me more on a personal level, and so he knows when to be gentle with me and when to push me harder, and he has really helped me with the consistency in the tracker, and he's just great to work with and really cares not only about my business goals, but my personal life as well. So it's been a blessing working with him, and I'm just very thankful to have him take me just to the next level in business and in life.
So I realized, I don't know how this is going to work. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get a job in the fire industry. What am I going to do? At that time, I was dating a young lady, and her aunt worked at some job fair thing somewhere in Massachusetts. So she said, you should go to this job fair and see what they have. And I was like, all right, I got nothing else at this point. I don't know what I'm going to do. At this point, I don't have a job at all. I'm completely out of work. And I end up going to this job fair, and they said there's this thing called weatherization. And you go in houses and you seal the hole. You make it more energy efficient. And I said the same thing. They said, is that something you might be interested in? I said, I like working with my hands, so let's give it a shot.
Plus, my dad was in construction.
My dad was in construction. Well, at this point, I said I have construction experience. Yeah, I've renovated houses. I have some construction experience. So I go, I take this class. It's like a 2-week class. We learn all this stuff, and I pass. And we get to the end, and they said, in the exit interview, they said, we really like your personality. We think you'd be a good fit for this company. It's the best company we have. So what would happen is companies would go to this job fair and find employees. That's what would happen. And the lady said, there's only 2 downsides. 1, they're in Boston, which was like an hour from where I lived. 2, there's travel required. So they work in a lot of other states. And I said, I'm not interested. I'm a homebody. I'm not driving into Boston every day. That ain't it. And she said, well, they pay like $60 an hour. And I said, no, they don't. This is not real. This is fake. But connect me with them. Let me feel them out. Let me see. Let me see.
Let me feel.
So
Let me feel them out.
I ended up.
All of a sudden, the commute's no problem.
It's a lot of money. I ended up doing a job interview with them. I did an interview, and they said, you've got a great personality. You're in. We're going to let you jump the line. We have a job coming up in a couple months. Hold out. We'll call you when it's ready. I was like, all right. I still don't really believe this. I remember I was at the movies with one of my friends. And at this point, I am dead broke. I don't even know how I paid for the movie. Going to the movies was irresponsible based on the amount of money. I don't remember what movie it was. Okay. I don't remember. But I got a call from my boss, or a text from my quote-unquote boss. And he said, hey, we're leaving next week. Are you good to go? And I was like, yeah, I guess. Like, sure. Let's see what happens. So pack a bag, drive down to the office, tell my family, hey, no, this is real. I'm going to Delaware from Massachusetts. So I'm going to be living in another state for at least a week. I don't know. We'll see what happens. So I drive to Boston. I pack all my stuff. I drive to Boston, and I get in a Subaru Outback. That was the car that my boss had. And we're getting ready to get in. I put my stuff in the back. We're packing up. And he said, the only thing I got to tell you before we leave is you're going to be making less money than everybody else. And I was like, I knew there was a catch. He said, because you're on probation, you're new, so your first paycheck, you'll be making less than everybody else. And I said, okay. And he said, so instead of $60 an hour, you'll be making $50. And I was like, no way. No way is this real. This is not real. So I got in a car with a man I'd met one time before. We drove 8 hours to another state. We moved into a house with 7 strangers, and I proceeded to learn how to do a job that I'd never done before with people I didn't know and a completely new industry. And I remember the first week we went down there, I did 2 things. 1, I found the nearest Anytime Fitness, which was right down the street from the house we were renting, and had a hole in the floor. The Anytime Fitness had a hole in the floor. I'm not even kidding. In Wilmington, Delaware. And I went to the grocery store, and all I could afford was bread, deli meat, and diet soda, and chips. And that's what I ate every single day for the first week I was down there. Then I got my first check after the week for, I think it was like maybe 35 hours at $50 an hour. So whatever that is, $1,750. Mm-hmm. And that was it. I was like, I'm in. This is it. This is my new career. I'm going to do this forever. I will never leave this behind. At that time, I had a girlfriend who lived in Mass, so I'd travel. The first time I went down there, I stayed for a week. Then the next time I stayed for 2 or 3. I was like, I'm in. I found money. I will do whatever it takes. I'm going to grind my face off. I don't care how long I have to stay on the road. I don't care where I have to work. I don't care how long I have to drive. I do not care what shift I'm working. I am in. And that was the beginning of the next phase.
Okay. What was the insecurity in hindsight? Yeah. And then what? And then what was the response to it? I think I know the answer, but I also am curious to your take, of course.
What was the insecurity? I think the biggest insecurity at that time was, being a failure, being a
success.
Being a loser, lack of success. That's why that job,
success, lack of money, lack of opportunity, lack of success. Yeah, that
job did so much for me. And I know I look back on it in positive and negative ways, but I became relatively wealthy, all things considered. Yeah. I mean, I lived at home still. I remember it was night and day. I was just stacking money. Just money was just going into the bank, and it was like, whoa, this is wild.
Yeah.
It just brought me a level of certainty that I had never had.
Well, you made what, like a lot more than anyone in your family ever made, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I worked one job I made $120 an hour. So
it was a trip. I remember the first time I started making money, good money. I remember it was wild. I was getting $12,000 checks every other week.
Yeah.
And it was like, it got to the point where it was a little obnoxious of, what do I do with all this? Do you remember that moment?
It's a good problem to have.
Yeah, it was great. It was really good.
It just brought me certainty.
Yeah. But growing up with very little money that we both had very little. I don't want to say, we were in the
definitely
lower class, lower middle class.
Mm-hmm.
When my stepdad left, I mean, I was broke. We were very broke. So when you start making real money, it is wild.
Yeah.
It's weird. It's awesome.
It just opened a lot of opportunities. I remember. So then I ended up breaking up with my girlfriend and moving in with, it was toxic. And then I moved in with an old family friend. So I used to have a best friend. I was over there every single day. His sister and I were really good friends. And I was like, hey, I got nowhere to live. Like, my family just moved. I just broke up with my girlfriend. I don't know what I'm going to do. And it's not that I couldn't afford to move. I had plenty of money to move, but I was never home. So I didn't have time to find a place. Mm-hmm. It was like, I broke up on Friday. I'm leaving on Sunday to go to work. I don't know where to put my stuff. And she said, well, you can move in with my family. And I was like, all right, let me see how that goes. But then from there, it was like, I was just stacking money. I didn't have any rent.
I know.
And then I got my first place of my own, just in this sketchy building. Just sketchy. The sketchiest. I used to have my gun under my bed every single night. Like, okay, let's see what happens here. And in retrospect, I don't know. Maybe I was just more sheltered than... I don't think it was as bad as I probably think it was, all things considered. But I remember applying for that apartment, and I was like, this is going to be fine. Of course I'm going to get this. I have a ton of money. My credit's perfect. This is going to be totally fine.
Mm-hmm.
And that...
It is a different life when you have...
It was completely different for me.
Yeah. I think we should probably dive into that a little bit. I know we're coming up on time here. Okay. There are positive ways and negative ways to overcome insecurity. And we're all overcompensating for something. At least early in our life. And that's why the drive to 5 is so powerful.
Mm.
Because the drive to 5 is whatever you were overcompensating for earlier in your life, you can get back to center now that you realize it was an overcompensation. So... didn't want to deal with your traumas, ended up drinking too much. Now you can get back to 5. Didn't have a lot of money growing up, ended up chasing money at the expense of fulfillment, got a ton of money, now, get back to 5. I guess from that frame, what would be the main takeaway for our listeners? That, because you and I are in positions where we're constantly contemplating our existence, and we do this for a living. So what I'm finding very true, and as uncomfortable as this is to share, when I meet people, it's very clear that they don't know themselves the way I know myself. Mm. It's because they don't do this for work. I'm sure if you're an accountant, you know more about accounting than Kevin and I do, because that's what you do for work. What we do for work is constantly contemplate our past, our present, and our future, and get to know ourselves and our listeners at a deeper level. This is all we do. So what would you share with our listeners from all this? If you were not a podcaster and you were still on that same trajectory of just insecure overcorrection, what would you recommend to our listeners?
Man, that's a really hard question, because my life was easier in many ways. I wasn't nearly as fulfilled, but my life was far simpler than it is today. So it's kind of a loaded question for me, because how challenging it's been to get to where we are today. I know not everybody's going to do this. It would probably be that when you stop trying to climb, you're gonna stop. At some point, I think we all have that kick in the face moment where we say like, I don't know if I can do blank anymore. And then we fall back into the same pattern. Because I didn't like my job at the end. I wanted to leave, but it took me a long time before I ever actually got to the point of leaving. And the me leaving thing was based on the fact that Alan and I had a workout scheduled with Catherine Nash. We were supposed to work out with Catherine, remember? Mm-hmm. And my company told me I was working first shift. And I called them and said, hey, we're working in a building. I'm telling you right now, it's second shift. They just told me we can't come in here tomorrow morning. I need you, I can't do that if that's the case. And they said, no, you're good. It's first shift. It's first shift. So the next day comes, or whatever. Maybe they called me later. I don't know. And they said, oh, it's actually second shift. And I said, I can't do second shift. I told you that. And they said, well, you have to come in. And I said, I'm not coming in. I have prior obligations. I have stuff that I already signed up for. I can't come in. And that was it. That was the end. They called me the next day and said, hey, we don't know if this is going to work. And I said, well, I'm telling you right now, I have to do the things that I've already committed to. And
I remember that conversation. That was in
the gym.
In my yard. No, so it was in the gym, and then you and I went back to podcast at my place.
Yeah.
The home that I grew up in, and Kevin was in the yard near the rock wall. I'll never forget it because I'm like, ooh, this is the moment. Because I remember quitting my job years before that.
Yeah.
And it's such a scary moment.
It was brutal.
It is. It's such a scary moment. Because you're just like, all right, let me take this net out from under me and just cut it, rip it up.
Yeah.
You know?
So what happened was I was at another gym for some reason. Every time I get difficult calls, I'm at the gym. And it was the HR person or what, I don't remember who it was. And we were on really good terms. It was amicable. They understood that I was not playing the game anymore, and I understood that they were not going to let me live my life the way I wanted to. So it was very much like, I'm leaving, they're good with it, it's all fine. Mm-hmm. But I got a call from the HR person, and she said, hey, this has been a really good relationship. Like, we love you. You've been nothing but great for this company. We know it's going to take time to transition to another job. What if we just keep you on for the next 30 days and you can just stack money? We'll just get you as many jobs as you want. And I said, no. I was like, I'm good. I don't want to come back. I don't want the money. Like, I'm just going to go do my thing. And that was very freeing, but it was also terrifying. It was also one of the most terrifying things ever of all time. But to tie it up in closing, early in life, I felt like I was working on my character, but I never had any money to show for it. Later in life, I had a lot of money to show for it, but I wasn't working on my character nearly as much. Then I lost all the money and gave up all the money and gave up the car that I had that I loved and all the things. I gave up all the things and went back to zero when it came to money, past zero. They'll let you keep going. If you run the card, they'll just let you keep charging it. But then I worked even more on my character. So I went from having what I felt was a good character and very little success to having a lot of success and not working on my character as much, to back to having nothing but being proud of who I was. I remember that. I was walking around the kitchen one day and I remember thinking, I'm the brokest I've ever been as a man, as a young man, a single, and I have no prospects of love at all. I feel like a loser. Like nobody cares that we're podcasting. Nobody's listening. This is like year 2. Year 1.5, maybe. But I remember thinking, I'm really proud of what I'm doing though. I'm fulfilled in what I'm doing. I'm not happy because I'm miserable, but I'm fulfilled. I'm fulfilled in what I'm doing. I'm proud of the man I'm becoming. I'm working really hard on myself. I'm tracking habits at this point. I came up with this system to track habits. So no, Alan did. But I finally felt like I was making progress towards something different, is what I would say. I don't know if that answers.
Right there of like, who's the guy? What's the system? It's hilarious.
I came up with something in my basement.
It's called
just tracking.
Performance tracking. Yeah, it just came to me one day.
I wouldn't have named it that. I probably would have named it something else.
Of course. Yeah, habit tracking. Last question.
Yeah.
What's your next level nugget that you would give to someone who feels insecure and lost like you once did?
I don't know. I think the only answer for insecurity is to walk through it. And it's not easy. You got to start small. But like, I'm sweating right now. Look at, there you go. There's my pit stains on this episode. I never would have done that in high school, but now it is what it is. What are you going to do? There's bigger fish to fry. There's bigger problems to solve. I care way more about what Alan thinks of me than somebody who's going to comment and say, "Oh, you're sweating through your shirt." Like, it's hot as F in this studio right now. This is episode number 5 or 4. It's been a long day. So, yeah, there are some things that there is no such thing as around. There's only through. And the sooner you start facing those things, I think the sooner you'll start understanding that they're only controlling you because you're letting them in a lot of ways. Now, easier said than done. I completely understand. Trust me, I spent my entire life trying to overcome it. And then this is the last thing I would say. The only reason I am where I am today is just because I just kept trying. I am probably not more intellectually gifted than you. Maybe I had some speaking skills in the beginning. Maybe I have some physical genetics for bodybuilding. I don't have them for basketball. So if you're a basketball player, you're ahead of me. But I did try to just get a little bit better every day. And that's all I do today. I try to get a little bit better every day. And it's not, we were talking about this earlier. I was talking about one of the fighters that I follow who's been fighting professionally, or he's been fighting for almost 15 years. And nobody knew his name until 5 years ago, 6 years ago. Nobody knew who he was. There's some people that did.
But now he's doing the title fight?
Now he's fighting for the title. And
so now everyone knows him.
And if
everyone
he wins,
who follows UFC.
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah.
And if he wins, everybody will know who he is. But that's a 12-year journey. And he did a little bit and a little bit and a little bit. It's just small stuff. It's the 90% of our success, your success, if you're out there, it's going to be the small stuff behind the scenes that nobody sees for most of us. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I would send that out as an inspirational next level nugget that you are 100,000 decisions from any future. If you make more positive decisions than negative, you'll have a more positive life. I know it's simplistic, but I would say, yeah, if you make the majority of your decisions positive in the right direction, you'll probably end up in the direction you want.
Well done, brother.
I appreciate it.
I could keep going. I know you know that, but I think my camera battery won't allow it.
That is a fact. I appreciate the questions. I appreciate the minimal laughs at my expense very much. I appreciate that. And my father was in construction, believe it or not.
Still is to this day.
Here's the thing. He actually was in construction. So
yeah, well, that's a good guess.
I guessed correctly. Guess. It made sense. I must have known something. Yeah. Next Level Nation, if you are getting to know us at a deeper level and you want to see more behind the scenes of what our lives look like, pretty boring, I'm not going to lie to you, but we post pictures of our cats and our pets and our travels and what we're up to and our wonderful partners. So I am at Never Quit Kid on Instagram. Alan is at Lazaros88, ALAZAROS88. Alan Lazaros on Facebook. Kevin Palmieri on Facebook. The more the merrier. You are part of this family. We are just a DM away. We are just an email away. You would be very surprised at how much we answer our DMs. That's my goal, at least. Sometimes I suck and I'm overwhelmed, but if you DM me and you listen to the show, I will get back to you for sure.
I will get back to you as well. I have not been as on top of it as of late, which I need to be honest about, but I will eventually get back to you. So if you just resonated with Kevin's story and you do feel insecure and overwhelmed and lost, directionless, struggle bus, one of the things that I think has made the biggest difference is just exposure therapy, which is just fear chasing. What's your fear? And what's one small thing you can do to face that fear? So if you're afraid of judgment, post something on social media that you're afraid to post. If you're afraid of getting a mentor, ask someone to mentor you. If you're afraid of getting a coach, ask someone to get a coach. So I have nothing to plug right now. What I want to plug is whatever you're afraid of, there's no way, to Kevin's point, there's no way it's not going to go away on its own. It's not going to go away on its own. It'll maybe never go away fully, but it will get smaller. Every speech we give, we're less scared. Every single time. Even the ones we've done terrible at, I do feel like we've just gotten way more exposure. So my only plug right now is whatever that fear is, maybe it's afraid to reach out to us. Maybe it's afraid to ask that person on a date. Maybe it's afraid to post on social media. Maybe it's afraid to share your story. Maybe it's afraid to start a podcast. Maybe it's afraid to get a coach. Maybe it's afraid to get a therapist. Whatever it is, do that thing. And if you DM us, to Kevin's point, we will get back to you. In my case, eventually, but we will get back to you.
Well, I Jeff too occasionally. It depends on what's going on, but we're grateful, right? At the end of the day, I said this to somebody the other day. If you didn't have anybody listening to your podcast, you'd just be talking to yourself. So you have to make sure you take care of the people who are taking care of you. That's always our goal. So tomorrow, for episode number 1434, named your episode "Life is About Choices." Kevin interviews Alan, and then there's a bunch of other stuff there, but it'll be based on that. So I'm gonna interview Alan. Where are we gonna go? I don't know. We'll see what happens. I'm sure it'll be wonderful because I know Alan better than most. So my goal will be to create some golden nuggets, some inspiration, some knowledge, whatever it is. As always, we love you. We appreciate you. Grateful for each and every one of you. And at NLU, we don't have fans. We have family. We'll talk to you all tomorrow.
Face your insecurities. Next Level Nation.